Welcome to the Futurisity Podcast. This is episode number 5 with Dmitri Mirakyan, Head of Product Analytics at Opendoor, former analyst and data scientist, and ex-Deloitte consultant. In his free time, he's working on very questionable side projects, but we'll cover them later. This episode probably will be one of the most down-to-earth episodes where Dmitri will share his insights and knowledge on two main topics: data science and consulting, AI for dating. In a nutshell, we'll try to figure out what makes smart people go into consulting. What are the major differences between data science consultants in corporations versus freelancers? How to automate online dating with AI, and much more. Before we roll into the chat with Dmitri, let me announce a major quality improvement update. This episode will be the very first episode that is supported by video, and it will be available on YouTube for free. And as you know, my work on the Futurisity Podcast will always remain free for you. Therefore, go right now into the description, click the link, check out the video on YouTube, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. On this stage, I think it's enough of self-promotion and annoying marketing. Now, let's roll into the episode. I'm extremely excited that you are here, Dmitri. Welcome to the Futurisity Podcast. Thanks for finding some time. Why wouldn't you briefly introduce yourself?
Sure. For what it's worth, that was the most beautifully Slavic introduction to a podcast that I've heard in my life. Just wonderfully self-deprecating, straight to the facts. Love it. I think you summed it up pretty well. My name's Dmitri, born in Russia. I moved to the States. Like to build things. I like to build teams that build things. Right now, that mainly involves working at Opendoor, where I lead a team of 5 decision scientists, and then continuing to build kind of silly side projects lately with AI. Some of them.
What are the main what the main focus of the company where you're working, like at the Opendoor? What do you do? Because as a head of product analytics, what are your most recent, for example, daily tasks that you're fulfilling?
Sure. So 2 separate questions.
Yeah.
One, what does Opendoor do? Opendoor is amazing. It makes it super easy to buy and sell a house. Anywhere from the United States, buying and selling homes kind of sucks. It involves talking to a bunch of people. It's a fairly painful process. And Opendoor just makes that process way easier and makes it way more accessible. In terms of what my team does, broadly speaking, there's uses data to make decisions, make series of decisions, and steer the business forward. So what that looks like is, 1, running experiments and tests, and kind of seeing how new features that we ship make a difference for our customers, and then enabling that to iterate on the product. 2, kind of building all of the foundational reporting and understanding of our product and monitoring how it works and how it evolves over time. Why is it going up? What is it going down? And 3, and I think this is my favorite part, is doing kind of the strategic and causal investigations into what are our opportunities and like really what are the fundamentals of how our customers behave. Really diving into the data, diving into behavior, playing with the data and identifying.
All right. In a brief pre-chat before the episode, you've mentioned that you had a very rough and tough path into data science and product analytics and stuff like that. So can you elaborate on that a little bit and share some of your background, where you came from and how you've entered the field? Because I think it might be relevant to the listeners. It would be awesome if you could focus specifically on your Deloitte experience, where you've been fired like 3 times from the projects.
Yeah, sure. So I think my first career coming out of school, I realized that mechanical engineering, after studying it, was not the way to go. I think most of the mechanical engineering jobs I saw around me were like working at Purina Pet Food or working at ExxonMobil. And none of those things interested me. I'm not a huge fan of oil and gas. And so I did what I think a lot of clever people do when they have no idea what they're doing. And I signed up for a consulting job. And that was just not a good fit. for my personality type, and I think for my strengths. I basically got fired off of my first 3 projects at Deloitte. First one I lasted 3 months, second one I lasted a month, third one I lasted a month and a half. And at that point, I was just like questioning, like, am I just incapable of doing work? Am I just terrible? Am I just a completely useless person because I can't seem to do this stuff? And I don't know. In retrospect, maybe I should have listened to the people that told me not to go into consulting. But the path out of that was realizing that my ability at doing slide decks and sitting in meetings all day was not perfect, and that a far better way to go was actually I discovered analytics within consulting, and that as a path forward was just I latched onto that, realized it was a tremendous amount of fun, started building stuff, and eventually found my way into an analytics role.
Did you have some skills, for example, such as programming or statistical skills before starting in the analytics department or on analytical projects, or did you learn on your way towards being an analyst?
Yeah. So I very much figured it out from the ground up. Actually, the way that I got into analytics was starting to do work on UI and UX. I was doing literally UI for an agile team, and then for a waste management project, literally like helping build the UI for people that picked up garbage. And that adjacent to that happened to be a team that was designing dashboards. And I was like, oh, this is fun. Started toying around with that, and discovered that I was really good at figuring out technical things really quickly, especially relative to the people around me. I don't know. I feel like my career arc from there has been very much failing upwards. So I got my analyst job without knowing SQL and without being interviewed for SQL. And I got my data science job from learning data science from YouTube videos, basically over the span of 3 weeks. Yeah, it's been a fun ride. Very much learning on the fly, learning like nights and weekends, and learning through hands-on learning.
I think we share the same path into data science because I have my background. I've done my degree in technical economics, like my bachelor's. And when the first lockdown hit, slightly before, I started learning basic stuff about programming because I couldn't program. I couldn't do programming before when I was at the university. I had some lectures on it, but it was like more or less bullshit. And lockdown for me was absolutely life-changing experience in terms of building my career path, because I was spending, I would say, 12, 14 hours a day just learning how to code. I have even my own Android application. Wouldn't recommend it as a first project, to start learning programming. It was pain in the ass. It was literally so difficult to pick up the programming concepts by developing your own application, because you have to care about some frameworks, some UI, UX parts of the development, and it was painful. But I think we share the same journey.
Why Android? Why not iOS?
Firstly, because I'm a happy owner of Google Pixel, and secondly, it just fits well.
Makes sense. I only say that I'm also a proud owner of an Android phone, but apparently all the money is in iOS. I think when you do the math, in terms of
true. But for me, it was more about learning things rather than doing something that can bring some money or reputation or whatever.
That's fair. You've got higher aspirations. You want to change the world and make the world a better place.
It was the first step. It was the first step.
So the next step is profit.
Hopefully one day. Actually planning this year, but I'll not reveal the details. I have one question on this podcast. I ask in every single episode. what makes you get up every day in the morning?
I like to build stuff, and I like to build teams that build stuff. And I think that like the deep on the inside of me is a 6-year-old that just drew a picture of a giraffe and is running around showing everybody the picture of a giraffe that I drew. And that feeling, that like distinct feeling of joy of like seeing people use something you've built or something that your team has built, watching people engage with it, watching it help people, watching people interact with it is just so, I don't know, like it gives me a dopamine rush that's bigger than anything else I've gotten in my life. I'm trying to curb down on how much I look at my metrics or like Hotjar videos, but the user interviews when I talk to people and they're like, yeah, this has been life-changing. Holy shit, this has helped me so much. That like just the brightest glow.
You know what I've noticed during like plenty of conversations with the people that almost all the smart people that I've been talking to are focused on other people. It's like the same characteristics or the same trait of character that I could see in every single person that's been on this podcast. They try to do something for other people. And I think it's something we can...
I mean, what else is there to do? Like, what's the alternative? What else can you just like build a model train in your basement?
There are plenty of opportunities. You can be a hedonist and just enjoy your wine daily till you're 30, then probably you'll die out of alcoholism. I don't know.
Yeah, but that's boring. I feel like you do the hedonism and then you drink a bunch of wine and you have a bunch of sweets and you're like, oh, that was entertaining. It feels like it's hard to avoid that like peak human sensation. It's like top of Maslow's pyramid. And what I think so many of us are wired to strive for is influence. I mean, part of the reason you're running a podcast, part of the reason that I'm on this, and part of the reason that I'm building this stuff. But this desire for, I think we talked about this before, but like this desire for immortality, to like leave a mark on the world and leave a mark on other people.
Absolutely. To leave something behind you, it's fundamentally amazing. And it's I have true respect for people who leave something or who do something during their lifetime so that after once they're gone, they have something for the kids or for the other people or whatsoever. It's truly remarkable, I think. And I think it's worth doing, or at least worth trying, because not everyone will succeed, but at least it's a fun way to go.
Let's see how far we get.
Yeah.
I believe in us.
Slowly moving to another topic, and we've touched it slightly before, data science and consulting. It's been years since Harvard Business Review wrote about data science being the hottest job of 21st century. Many young talents are now attracted to this lucrative career path. A successful data scientist requires a wide range of skills such as domain knowledge, business acumen, analytical thinking, problem solving, statistics, math, to some point engineering, communication skills, and so on. In one of your interviews, you've mentioned that, citation, a lot of smart people who don't know what to do go into consulting, and you've said it basically like 5 minutes ago. As a data scientist and a previous ex-consultant, you've been on the both sides of the coin, right? So what makes smart people go into consulting? What are the like top 3 reasons for that?
I mean, first of all, I don't know if I qualify as a smart person. I certainly don't think I'm qualified to speak on behalf of smart people. But I don't know, like, I can speak on behalf of like second quartile people, maybe. And couple of reasons. One, you see a bunch of other smart people that have no idea what you're doing it, and you're like, cool. I see other clever kids doing this. Maybe this is not a bad path. And like, it feels dumb to say, but it was a non-zero reason. Like, you look at the people around you and you're like, huh, like a lot of the smart people I know are going into consulting. It is a way to just procrastinate on life. I feel like there's a lot of decisions are hard. Optionality is valuable. People appreciate optionality. And I think once you go into a technical role, then you start going in depth into a certain space and switching is harder. Like from the standpoint that I do now, I've been doing product analytics for 3 years. It is harder for me to switch into another role. And so I think people do consulting in a lot of ways for the same reason that people sometimes do grad school is they haven't made up their mind on what they want to do yet and they haven't figured it out. And they do that next. And then I think this goes along with the optionality is that it does keep your career track moving forward. So it's a way to procrastinate that still gets you paid and still evolves your career because guess what? A bunch of people, including my team, will hire ex-consultants because of the boot camp it gives you. And there's this kind of like universal acceptance. Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry. I talk a lot of shit about consulting, but I love hiring ex-consultants. And I think I've gotten a massive amount of stuff out of it, as much as it was a terrible fit for me.
What are some of the benefits that you see when you hire people in the consultants that you don't see in people that just were working on some specific products in a specific company in a specific industry? Like what are the key traits of characters? Can you delve into it?
Sure. So if you think about it from a high level, like consulting is an input and output machine. Deloitte is an input and output machine. It brings in young, starry-eyed kids that are like, I think that the archetype that they go for is insecure overachievers. People that want to work long hours and they want to learn and that can be customer facing. And then it puts them through a meat grinder of one, just like solving, like taking a step back. You do a series of projects and the overarching framework for it is you're solving open-ended problems in structured ways and communicating the results clearly. And you're always solving for the business outcome and you're communicating the business outcome. And then you just do that over and over and over again for a bunch of different things and a bunch of different clients and a bunch of different settings. And so I got out of it two things primarily. One is just like being way more clear in my communication than I ever would have been otherwise, both in writing and in meetings. Like, this is the point. This is what we're trying to solve for. How do we get there? And then two, just like the confidence of getting dropped into a completely new and unfamiliar setting and knowing the playbook to figure out how to start getting stuff done. Who are the players? What are my constraints? What am I solving for? Let me start getting an inventory of the problems and the situations. Let me put together a plan, propose the plan. How do we work towards a solution? It maps nicely to internal strategy teams, but it also like maps nicely to internal strategy in basically any org.
That's what I find pretty interesting because in the data science field, right, there should be some domain knowledge, like about specific industry, for example. It can be, you name it, marketing, biology, psychology, mechanical engineering, chemistry, whatsoever. And it's very difficult to be like a good data scientist or a great data scientist without it, right? So how important is the main knowledge in data science, firstly? And secondly, if we're taking one specific data scientist in the consulting corporation, let's say Deloitte or Accenture, whatever, and in just a mid-size company in chemistry industry, what are the differences, basically? So can you drop a couple of words about it?
Yeah. So one caveat, I would not describe myself as a real data scientist. I was a real data scientist for about a year, and then I moved back to managing a team that is, let's say, like, we run experiments, we do a little bit of causal inference. We're more technical than most analysts, but we don't ship ML models on the day-to-day. I think as a proper, like if you think about data science in the context of ML and in the context of big tech company, like domain knowledge is super important. But I think there's a spectrum of analytics, and I think that spectrum. How do we frame this? He mentioned two examples, like one a relatively early stage like startup, and two like kind of an established company, like either big tech or like a chemical company. And I think in the latter, this like established company, big tech, the like industry, experience and domain knowledge matters a lot. People will hire for that. At this point, like even as our team has matured, we've started to hire more for domain knowledge, because you want experts in the room and you want people that move like slowly but thoughtfully and deliberately, and you need deep expertise because you're applying fine-grained sandpaper to your problems. You're solving like very, very detailed problems with a lot of expertise. Smaller companies, earlier stage startups, and kind of, I guess, like data roles in companies that are less data oriented, you can get away with a lot more fragmented expertise and just a portfolio of here's stuff that I built. And also consulting knowledge does help a ton in this case, because what they're hiring for, and ultimately what my team does, is solve complex open-ended problems with math. And that is such a fun discipline on its own. And I do think the requirement for domain knowledge is like much less critical.
Because what I was thinking, and the reason I prepared this question is basically, if we take some early stage startup in, I don't know, chemistry industry, right? They don't, you should have some domain knowledge in order to apply all your analytical skills, all your engineering skills, all your machine learning skills to that specific data, because it's like very fine, very specific data on its own. And in the consulting, when you're assigned to a project, it can be whatever industry you are not prepared to. So it can be banking, it can be finance, it can be some aerospace engineering or whatever. And that's what I'm talking about. And from my point of view, consultants or data scientists in a consulting are way more flexible, way more generalists in terms of deconstructing the problems. They don't focus too much on the domain knowledge, but they focus on more on a fast learning pace and fast problem deconstruction, basically. And that the main like difference I've thought, or at least I've faced during my experience in the consulting, because I'm in a consulting company right now as a data engineer. And so basically that's the main differences I've seen from my point of view.
I agree. And maybe the thing that carries over is the audacity to think that you can solve any problem without in-depth expertise by just like taking a long weekend to Google and figure out how other people do it and then applying the same things. But it is amazing how many problems in industry are like, one of the biggest things that I got out of consulting, like now looking around, is that like you assume that everybody's got their shit together. People don't. Like there's so many deeply sophisticated, deeply thoughtful companies where there's so many things that are ludicrously under-optimized. I don't know if this is necessarily true in like the chemistry space, but at least in the software space and places where things move fast, so many things are under-optimized. There's so many opportunities to like literally take the stuff that you do in consulting, take a random HBS article, take an article that you learned about product analytics, and just apply that and make things incrementally better by 30%. Like you assume that you need to be an expert. A lot of places you don't. A lot of places you can get away so far by just, if that wasn't the case, then like why would anybody hire consultants? Why would consulting companies sound ludicrous?
Actually, it's something like really like new, something very new I discovered right now, that people like, or people in love with hiring consultants. I've never thought it was like such a hot trend in the industry. Definitely an eye-opener for me. And yeah, let's see where it goes. I think also in general, the general trend is to people focus on hiring specialists who can learn very complex concepts of like this, deconstruct very complex problems within very short amount of time, rather than having like full stack expertise in one specific industry or technology or knowledge or whatsoever, because I think the environment is too dynamic, like way too dynamic, and it's getting more dynamic with like every single day with all these crazy technologies like OpenAI, ChatGPTs, large language models and stuff like that. I think it's yeah.
Yeah, that's terrifying. I have no idea of how exactly that's all going to play out, but it does seem very apparent that like the world in 5 years is going to look very different than the world today. It feels like pretty rare to see. I remember hearing about this on the Indie Hackers podcast, but like it's pretty rare to see in your lifetime kind of like a technology that you know is going to change everything, like things as we know it. And like mobile felt a little bit like that. Like mobile was one of those things. Crypto looked like that to some people. I don't know if it is, but it feels very apparent with AI that like the world is going to be very, very different in a few years than it was before. And it's not even like a few years, like it's already here.
I mean, it's a fascinating era we are living at, because it's mind-blowing what we experience and what we can see, like the birth of this generative AI, the usable generative AI that literally every single person can use or can have access to. It's really mind-blowing.
Yeah, maybe we should become AI consultants.
I think it will be definitely a very hot and lucrative career path in the next 5 to 10 years, such as prompt engineering. I mean, 2 years, 3 years ago, it was nothing. It didn't exist basically, and now it's literally a very fundamental career path that you can go not at the universities, but it will be here, and it's already there. It's crazy.
What's your take on consulting and like generalist versus specialist?
I mean, I've been working in renewable energies sector as an analyst, not as a data scientist. I was more focusing on reporting and dashboards and stuff like that, but in a very specific industry, like really deep into photovoltaics, for example. And I was building some dashboards for the marketing department, for sales and stuff like that. And I had to have that specific knowledge about how, for example, a photovoltaic cell works in order to get the understanding, okay, that this data is that, this data is that. I have to combine both them, multiply by 5, and then it will be the number I'm wanting to send to my boss, so to say. In consulting, I have this feeling I have to learn 5 times faster than I had to learn during my work at the startup. And yeah, it's pretty fun. I mean, actually, I've started just this month. I've been working on some internal projects for the last 1.5 years. But yeah, let's see where it goes. But my feeling is that I have to learn way faster complex concepts. And thanks God I have this skill. So
congrats.
Thank you.
Congrats on the new job. And I agree. It's a lot of fun. It was certainly a lot of fun when I was on that train.
Yeah, let's see where it goes. I mean, I'm still excited. I'll not be crunching numbers. I'm more in the data engineering role where I have to write SQL and take care of databases. But yeah.
Have you tried replacing your job with ChatGPT yet?
Yeah, that's
the fascinating. Sorry, like the world moves quickly. Maybe by the time this podcast drops, this will be outdated already. But the most fascinating thing that I think I saw a week ago from the AI space is that it turns out that the best way to get AI to produce good SQL is by having it run the same way that an analyst runs it. I don't know how you run your SQL, but in my case, I write something, I run it, I get an error, and then I run it again, and I get another error, and then I run it a third time, and it works, but the data's not what I want it to look like. So then I adjust it, and then finally on the fourth or fifth time, I get exactly what I need. Turns out that the secret to getting good SQL with AI is build a loop such that every time that it generates an error, it feeds that error back into it. And once you run it for a couple of loops, it produces workable SQL.
So
and then
basically,
you tell it, this
you take
data.
use of the reinforcement learning and...
Not even reinforcement learning. It's purely prompt engineering. Like you can try this on ChatGPT or anything like that right now. But like literally give it feedback on paste an error back into it, or say like this data looks off like this, and then it updates the code. And you can build that. If you build that into a loop, then you can get pretty consistently workable SQL.
I'll try it out. Because I still didn't start at the project, but I'll definitely try it out.
It's harder than it. Like it might be a little bit more complicated than I'm explaining to like implement, but it is.
I mean,
fascinating.
Just because for me, it's like kind of became normal that people use such AI tools for generating code. But if we make a step back and think about it, it's fucking crazy that a computer can write computer code for you based on just plain text. This insane.
Yeah, well, we thought that computers couldn't do art or couldn't do creative stuff, and now 6 months ago, it turns out it does art better than people. Now it turns out that it writes code better than people, and it turns out that
faster, better.
Does better on the SATs than most people, and that's it's a weird thing.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
That's not something that I've got great words for. It does it better. It doesn't do it better than the best of the best, but it does it better than an average person, which is like the implications of that are like weird to grasp at. Like that's an I don't know.
Sometimes it's a bit scary to me, to be honest.
I mean, like setting aside, I guess there's like two options that you've got. Like you can stick your head in the sand and continue doing what you're doing, or like you can take the time to step back and say, where's the ball going? How can I position myself to be in a place where I can catch that ball? Because it does seem apparent that like writing SQL as a day job is super valuable and super hot 5 years ago, and super valuable and super hot now. Like that's bound to diminish, right? Like the tools are here that can do it on an okay basis. They're very flawed so far still, but it feels obvious that they're going to get there. And so I guess the question to us both is, I don't know if I count as a young person anymore at 28, but how do I run where the ball is going rather than where the ball is today? Because it's clear that the ball is going.
That's actually a very good point. Because I'm 24. I was when I was, I would say 20, I was thinking always about, okay, we're now here. The ball is here, as you've said. Okay, how do I start with it? And now I'm like, in the past 2 years, I'm trying to predict where the ball will be in the next 5 to 10 years. And maybe data science influenced me in a very specific way where I try to predict like the outcomes, or maybe I just became like more mature. I don't know.
I do like the data science framework. I used to hate my job title, which is decision science manager, and the decision science team, and my team is decision scientist. But like, if you read the book Algorithms to Live By, there's so much of the work of an analyst when you set aside the SQL. Like setting aside the SQL, that's the like basic, that's the boring part. That's the easy part. That's the part that gets replaced by AI super fast. It's like, how do you make decisions in a quantitatively informed way? And it turns out that there's so much more art and so much more nuance and so much more beauty to it than like looking at random charts. Like, how do you think about things causally? How do you predict where things are going? Like, how do you think about everyday business decisions the way that you would solve a physics or a chemistry problem? And I think my favorite part about being in this role is that I've started to think about more of my life decisions and like more about my day to day in kind of a quantitatively informed way. And it's so beautiful. Like your background was
basically technical economics, where I had roughly 60% of some economical stuff, such as marketing, accounting, and stuff like that, and roughly 40% of hardcore physics, mechanics, and stuff like that.
You ever notice that like you look at the world a little bit differently now? Like you look at like certain behaviors, or like you look at certain changes or news or like systems, and you like start to think of like, oh, like how does that work? How does that break down into its parts? Like, what are the incentives? What are the things that drive it?
To be honest,
like you kind of start
to be honest,
see that
I'm a big fan of not all the listeners and you know, but I'm a big fan of building systems, because I'm very happy when I can create a system that works on its own, something that is either automated, or if we're talking from like a manpower, or like from the human perspective, where everything is kind of either delegated or managed so it works on its own. It's fascinating feeling. But yeah, you start to see some things, especially in use. For example, my biggest learning from my data science journey was I started to focus on the definitions extremely precisely. When I talk, when I communicate, when I write emails, when I chat with my friends, I try to focus extremely on the word, like on the wording, and on the definitions behind the wordings. Because I think if all the people on this planet would have been thinking about the definitions of the words a bit more, we could have avoided a lot of different problems, wars, and stuff like that.
You get a lot of packet loss in verbal communication from people not understanding things quite the same way, and like not communicating things super clearly. It's a fascinating way to think about it, and there's definitely ways to make it better. I think one of my...
What is your biggest learning? From data science, and from the way you are looking on different things, such as, I don't know, use verbal communication, whatsoever, you name it.
I really like to quote, it might have been Elon Musk, it might have been from a book, like verbal communication or written communication is actually fairly low bandwidth in terms of how clearly and how quickly you're able to communicate information. Right? There's this like infinite range of thoughts that you've got, and you're trying to force it into a certain arrangement of characters and words. And I think one of the fascinating parts for me about AI is, rather than just generating text, it's like, how do you interpret tone and understand like all of the, like, how do you like really interpret the true meaning of a message? And then like, how do you take what you intend to communicate and actually communicate it exactly in the intended way? Right now, there's like, setting aside just language barriers, and like there's so many weird nuances about like professional communication and idioms and tones and subtext. And I think, especially if you're a mathy person, you're not very wired to understand those things. I certainly struggle with understanding those things. But one of the most fascinating things to me about generative AI, that's a bit of a tangent, is like the ability and the opportunity to both interpret and to communicate in a specific kind of way, to like narrow the gap between the message that you're intending to communicate and the message that actually comes out the other end.
Decoding and encoding the messages, or in general the information, is a pretty tough task, and I think it's kind of undervalued in the modern society, if we can say so. Like the way of communication.
Thinking about human life as like a developer or data scientist, I think has been my favorite thing. Like thinking about things in like systems and blocks, thinking about memory in terms of caching, like taking these like abstract and fluid things and like seeing, like interpreting them as systems and understanding some of the inputs and outputs has been, seeing the world as an engineer and as a data scientist has been
absolutely. I enjoy it like as crazy. And for me, for example, maybe you're familiar with it, the best way of learning concepts, because there are so many algorithms, so many statistical concepts as well in analytics and data science. I was using, and I've developed for me, I don't know actually how, but somehow I figured out it works pretty well for me, this method of black box, and it was probably taken away from the AI systems, where I have the input information, I need some output information, and I only have to know where to Google some specific things and the name of them, but I don't have to understand clearly what's inside of, I don't know, some correlation formula or some algorithm and how it works. For example, k-means. I've used it in my thesis. I mean, you just have to find really fuzzy information, and with some basic math and statistics, you will refresh it within minutes, maybe a couple of hours.
I'm personally on board with that approach. I do that approach a lot. I think there's sometimes value to like understanding what's underneath, but it's certainly
the biggest problem with that is that you cannot know everything what's under the hood of each single algorithm. Either you are a professor in mathematics, like really on a high end, or I don't know, but
I mean, like all other things, there's like a pretty mathematical solution to it, which is like, are you optimizing for speed?
Yeah, exactly.
Are you optimizing for perfection? If you're optimizing for speed and just shipping stuff, then fuck it. Abstractions. Stack black boxes on top of black boxes and on top of black boxes. And if you're in a highly competitive and commoditized space, or if you're just trying to learn and you're trying to ship, you're never going to go anywhere if you're trying to get down to the deepest level of abstraction. Like nobody writes freaking machine code anymore. Right? Everybody's using some form of abstraction. People love Python because Python abstracts the shit out of things. Like it is ludicrously inefficient. It is so much less efficient than so many other things. But it is so accessible and it moves so quickly.
Facts.
By essentially, instead of like, oh, I don't need to write this stuff, I can just write import black box and black box do this, and just layers and layers and layers of black boxes. And you know what? It's fine, because most projects aren't built to last 20 years. And if they do, then you can start learning the abstraction. But if you're like you and me and the majority of the world, like software has a lifetime. Build it quickly, get it done.
Yeah, totally agree. Slowly moving to your passion, to your projects, AI, dating, and machines. On one side, online dating is booming. like platforms like Tinder, Bumble, Hinge, etc., aren't going away anytime soon. Their popularity is on the rise with new users registering every day. So here are some key statistics for the audience. Firstly, it's estimated that there are over 8,000 competitive online dating sites and platforms worldwide. 8,000 is a mind-blowing number. In 2022, over 360 million people worldwide use dating apps or dating sites to meet new people. In a recent study, 19% of internet users in the United States claimed that they were currently using an online dating app or platform. And even more interesting, a further 27% of participants claimed to have used an online dating app in the past. Like, it's basically in total almost half of the sample used online dating platforms at least once. That's sick. And on the other side, there is generative AI, we've been talking about recently, is booming even more than dating apps. I don't have to tell you about ChatGPT, Llama, Bard, DALL-E, Sparrow, and stuff like that. You know about them. But, I mean, the key takeaway here, ChatGPT exceeded 1 million users 5 days after its launch. So it says everything. Phenomenal. So following, I'd like to discuss one of your recent value negative, as you name it, projects that totally got my attention. The project name is Your Move AI, online dating chat assistant that can write flirty messages and catchy bios. It would be awesome if you explain what is it, how many users do you have, how you identify the product market fit, and especially how the idea for the Your Move AI was born. Because I have a feeling it was born somewhere in a pub as a sketch on a napkin.
Yeah. So you're a technical person. I'm a technical person. I think when you find yourself doing any given thing like 5 or more times, you're like, how can I hack this? How can I make this easier? How can I automate this stuff? I think my original introduction to AI started when I became a manager, and I was playing around with GPT-3, and I was like, can I get this to replace my role as a manager? And I built a joke app that did not work very well, but it was funny. And then earlier this year, I was spending a lot of time on dating apps in New York, and I was like, one, this is exhausting. This is a lot of conversations to lead up to a date. Like, I don't know about you. I don't enjoy texting on dating apps. I feel like it's pretty boring up until you actually see a person in person. And two, I suck at flirting. Like, I don't know how to flirt, and the conversations always ended up a little bit dry. So I was like sitting in an airport, and I was like, can I get AI? This was before ChatGPT. I just had the API access. I was like, can AI flirt better than I do? And I played around with the endpoint a little bit, and the short answer was it wasn't very good, but it was better than me. It could consistently, after a few tries, generate a message that was better than what I would have written. Acknowledging that is a very low bar, and it's not particularly hard to be better at flirting than I am. And so a week later, I was drinking at a party, and I was talking about this idea with a friend. And he was like, oh, you said you can build it. Can you build it? I'm like, yeah, I think I can. Probably like over a weekend. He's like, can you do it next week? I'm like, well, going to a wedding, but you know what? Fuck it. I could do it the week after. And I built it, and people liked it, and people started using it, and then more people started using it when I started working it more. And so now, a little ways later, got probably about 500 daily users. All in all, somewhere in the range of like 14,000 registered users on the app. We're running at about 2,500 queries a day. We've processed 20,000 screenshots, and our messages have been used around 40,000 times.
Not bad for a side project, hey?
I mean, Admittedly, I've poured a lot of time into this. I've mostly set aside actually dating and actually talking to people in favor of building this. But it has been just so massively rewarding having conversations with people and seeing like this helps and this gets people dates. And this makes their life easier because it is just such an exhausting process. I think for people on both sides, like there's just so much. It is so tedious and it is so painful and it is like such a hard matching system. And I feel like a lot of people that I know just end up giving up because it's too much work or they lack confidence. In a ways, it feels like trying to interview for jobs when you're like 2 years into school and nobody even wants to look at your resume. It's just like, it's not just that it's a lot of work. It's like, it's a little bit demoralizing. The amount of like swipe endlessly, start conversations, those conversations die. Like a lot of people just give up. And I think the main value proposition of this has been helping people get better, making the process way easier. And as a result, just like reducing the amount of loneliness.
That's the main reason you've named it. I don't use any dating apps. I have my girlfriend, but I hate dating apps.
Congrats. I think you made the right move.
Thank you. I enjoyed.
For those that don't have a girlfriend yet, like dating apps are not a terrible way to go.
Obviously, it improves your chances to find a girlfriend or a date or some kind of a relationship to another person. Definitely, for sure. That's and they will not go away any time soon. So you have.
And statistically speaking, like if you're in the U.S. right now and you're dating somebody, there's like a 2/3 chance that you might like a 50, maybe 2/3. I don't know the statistics on it, but like there's a pretty high chance that you met on a dating app. Can I ask where you met your partner?
Back very long time ago in Belarus. Yeah.
Smart. Bypass that mess entirely. Congratulations. I do have some people that use this to talk to their coworkers and use it to talk to their spouse.
Sorry? Once again?
I do have a couple of users on record that use the app to talk to their coworkers, occasionally use it to talk to their friends, and some that use it to talk to their spouse. So there's a friendly, informal version, and there's a subset of people that just like when they don't have the social energy to reply. I'm actually in that boat too. Sometimes you just like cannot come up with stuff that like end up using that to not just for dating apps, but to interact with people, interact with coworkers.
I've seen somewhere recently that there was this statistic that by 2025 or by 2026, almost 10% of all the content online will be AI generated. Can you believe it? Like out of 10 articles, one article will be AI generated. That's sick.
There's people that say that it's already that way now. Have you ever heard about the internet theory? Oh, it's beautiful. The theory that says that like the internet is actually just all bots talking to other bots. There's like very few actual users, and that it is like literally just bots replying to other bots. I mean, you see that happening on Reddit and on Twitter to some degree already. Right? Like the solution to getting content up on Twitter is you take a post that was popular 2 years ago and then you repost it, and then you take a top comment from that post, and then you repost that. You look like the top comments, and then you apply that, and you generate what like looks like organic engagement. And then you use that to market yourself.
At the very beginning, when Musk bought the Twitter and introduced his Twitter Blue for $7-8 a month, I thought it's like crazy idea. But somehow now I have this feeling maybe it's not that dumb, because it's the only way you can make sure that you talk to a real person, and it will boom even more in the future. So maybe it's not that bad to have a social media that where you can.
Yeah, but have you seen what real people are posting on Reddit and on Twitter. I think the problem is that like the people that get the most attention. You read much Twitter influencers. You ever notice that what they're posting is like literally the same stuff that was posted 6 months ago? They're just like you're taking the same information and you're rephrasing it slightly, or you're posting it as a list. Like the way that people win at Twitter is by consistently regurgitating ideas, which is like, I mean, it's nice that it's not AI, but in a certain sense, it feels fairly hard to.
It's very difficult to distinguish because I have this feeling that people post the same stuff over and over again, slightly rephrasing, as you've said, and
like just because it's not explicitly AI generated doesn't mean it's not algorithmic. And at that point, like it looks like shit. It smells like shit.
Yeah. I don't know. During my research, I came up with a question. First thought that came to my mind actually when I learned about your Move AI is that some people have very specific writing and communication style. The best example would be, let's say I'm a male, I curse in everyday life a lot, right? And bio will be, instead of grammatically correct, AI generated, I'm in love with Netflix movies, join me each evening, something like fucking love movies. It usually gives a very good first impression about the person behind the profile when people see, okay, not my type, especially for a woman, because the biggest fear of a female going on a date from Tinder, let's say, is that she'll be probably raped or killed by some very aggressive, preoccupied, furious male. And the biggest fear of a male getting on an online date, that he'll spontaneously discover another male when the time comes. So that are the main differences, let's say. And does AI-generated messages and bios really reflect person's personality? So basically, that's the question.
Short answer is my products don't do that yet. I'll flag that. It is somewhat there's a variety of options in terms of like setting tone and how something sounds, and make it like more tailored or less. I think one of the next steps forward that we're tinkering on is actually making it sound more like you. That's actually like, if you're building something on your own, that's relatively trivial to pull off. So there's two ways to do it. One is to like actually tune the AI on yourself. It's actually a product that I'm planning to ship either next week or the week after, just something that I wanted to tinker on for myself. GPT3andme.com, which is send me your data. I'll show you how to download your data from Facebook or otherwise, and we'll tune the model on you, and you can get a chatbot and an API endpoint that sounds like you. Two is, like you can actually just like feed the content, feed what you sound like back to the AI, and make it generate content that sounds more as in your theme. It's super easy to make it generate content in the style of a certain writer and the style of a certain dialect. And I think what you'll see moving forward is this like greater degree of personalization and making it convey a certain message while still sounding a little bit more authentically like you. I think the one challenge there is, I'm thinking out loud, is like, short of giving me access to your message history, like how do I understand what you sounds?
Because that's the main point. That's the main point of the whole personality question. That I sound different, I write differently than you, and then my girlfriend, and then some other friends of mine. How do we improve, if we can say so, the application so that it can reflect really your personality and really be fine-tuned on a large scale? Because you can do it personally, I can do it personally, but if we're talking about like real products on a large scale, not even early stage startups, how can we do that? So what would be your roadmap to getting to that point?
Again, there's like a relatively basic way of doing it, which is just like describing yourself. Something that we're doing currently is a profile generator gives us some information about you. We can take that information and tune the responses that you generate, the responses and openers, to be more like you based on who you are, your interests, your personality, the way that you answer those questions. Another way is just like any sort of ML training model, just like give it some data about yourself, either a snippet of writing or some of your message history, which FYI, we don't save data, we burn and delete the data. But like, if you build a pipeline that enables that, you can build a custom product that sounds like you, but better. Like that's something you or I could ship this weekend or next weekend. And I think where this is going pretty soon is like having your own little personal, everybody having their own virtual assistant that you can talk to that like helps you schedule, helps you screen people, etc. And like you can have a generic version, but it's relatively trivial to tune any sort of AI to sound and behave more like you. I think the end game of this is basically allowing everybody to be the best version of themselves at all times. Right now, it's still relatively text-based, but I think you're seeing more and more people do it with voice interactions. And once you've solved the latency problem, you get closer and closer to that proverbial computer that sits in your ear and tells you what to say on a date, on an interview, in a call. To like,
there's been a really fascinating engineering masterpiece. It was Steve Jobs being on Joe Rogan's podcast. I don't know if you've heard it. It's phenomenal. Wild.
Yeah,
it's really crazy. And I mean, the technology is there. It's just the question of usability of this technology applied to like on a larger scale.
I think the beautiful part about that is like we've got the technology now. The usability as a problem is one that we've solved a billion times. It works pretty straightforward. You make the technology publicly available to people, and then a bunch of people like you and me and everybody and their dog in New York and San Francisco and on the builder community goes and does their best to build a product that solves a bunch of people's problems. Everybody learns from each other. Everybody iterates quickly, and eventually the best stuff floats up to the top. Capitalism is such a there's such a beautiful set of incentive systems set up that like technology's there. We're now on a race to find a way to like make people's lives easier and more useful.
There's something beautiful about very healthy competition, and I think it's a fundamentally good thing to have that kind of competition. Otherwise, we'll land somewhere in a USSR back in the days, and I don't like this option at all.
No, it certainly makes life harder for people like us.
You've been talking about this very specific problem.
Yeah. Cool. So, brief aside, like computer security is like in cybersecurity is an interesting space. One reason it's boring is that it's a tail risk, and if you work on anything that's a tail risk, then people don't worry about it until bad stuff happens. But I think the fun part about it, and I think the fun part with this kind of AI security stuff, is that it just evolves no matter where you are or where the technology is. It always evolves quickly because there is a group whose best interest is to figure out how to circumvent your defenses. And there's a group of people defending that are always trying to figure out new ways to defend against the new thing that the people that are trying to attack are doing. So it forces you to evolve quickly. There's never a boring point because both ends people's job is to figure out how do I circumvent the other person? How do I overcome their defenses, or how can I defend against the latest attack?
It's the typical cybersecurity issue. Yeah, so basically what I was saying is that the point is with my university was hacked in December. 17,000 students, workers, professors, personal data leaked to Vice Society. I don't know if you know this hacking group. People say there are some rumors that Vice Society comes from Russia. I'm not one, to be honest, but that's the whole point of defending and attacking. And people, it's never boring in cybersecurity. I have this feeling.
Yeah, I guess that was my point, is that like there's never going to be 100% solution. I think if you're talking about AI and making sure that it's not somebody fake and making sure that it's real, like you're never going to be able to catch it 100%. You're always going to have some people finding new ways to circumvent defenses, and there's always going to be people finding new ways to defend against it. Like somebody wrote a check if this was AI generated tool, and then people immediately found a way to circumvent this by like literally telling ChatGPT, rewrite this in a way that doesn't sound like it was written by AI. And it does that. I feel bad for school instructors. I think that's like my biggest thing here.
Really?
Like,
why?
Yeah, like imagine being a school instructor trying to defend against plagiarism now. Like, can you?
Difficult.
How do you defend against cheating? I'm sure people find creative ways to do it, where you just move away from having people write essays at home and start doing more creative things.
I mean, New York already banned ChatGPT in private schools and public networks, so something like that I've read recently.
Yeah, but what's keeping people like from going home and writing their essay on ChatGPT?
That's the point. You cannot ban it. People will always find a way around it.
Yeah. And I guess at some point you move to the same world. Like we use calculators and math now. And maybe you move to a world where like you're generating content. It's an allowed tool. And just like in the real world, you're figuring out how to maximize your output with access to all the tools that you would have had access to in the real world.
Yeah.
The question is just like, what the hell does that world look like when everybody's got the ability to generate unlimited content at their fingertips? But also, sorry, like, positive note, I don't know, I feel like there's all this freaking out about like, oh, like videos and sounds that look like a real person. Like, you know what came around 15 years ago? Photoshop. And Photoshop was really great at making any picture, like making an image of anything fake. And I feel like there was a freak out at the moment of like, oh, people can create fake photos of anything. And I think we turned out just fine. Like the world did not fall apart as a result of Photoshop. And I think to the same degree, like the world's not going to fall apart as a result of deepfakes.
I think we just have to find a proper borders and a proper fences on the sides of the road, like for the humanity to move forward, because it will be here one way or another, and it's definitely here I'm 100% sure it's definitely better to have it open sourced and available to general public rather than having it in specific hands of the governments, of some power people or whatever. That's for sure, 100% clear on that. And yeah, we just have to establish these fences, like put these fences.
It's kind of like, I don't know, I'm fascinated and scared, but more fascinated than scared, I think. Like,
True,
things are going to break.
Either.
Like something's going to break. Some people will find a way to take advantage of this, but
I mean, it's definitely better if we all have access to it, so it will not be such a huge gap between people who use it and people who, like, not vice versa, people who have access to it and people who don't have access to it. So, yeah, let's see where it goes, but fascinating.
Well, let's check in the year and see how the world looks different. I agree with you on democratization being like a decent solution for everything.
I'm really extremely convinced it's the only way to keep it more or less safe, because I believe in the power of good humanity and in the power of humans to the best out of such complex tools and technologies such as generative AI. So yeah, let's see.
I will say, really quick aside, like,
Sure.
love humanity, love people. Do you think that putting things in people's hands is a great way to like really see the limitations of it quickly because people will try to break it? As somebody running a consumer product now, one of the most fascinating things for me is like all the different ways that people will find to try and misuse it and try and exploit it. Like it is wild and annoying and frustrating at how like creative ways people find a way to. It's always a small percentage of people, but there will always be a small percentage of people that like try to find ways to use it not as intended and get around whatever guardrails they've tried to put.
I mean, it's an unavoidable part of humanity, and we just have to accept and to adapt to it. Otherwise,
it's fun. I'm not mad. I'm a little bit annoyed because it consumes more of my brain space than I would have to. But like, yeah, you put something on the internet, like you put out a garden, somebody's going to try to take a shit in the middle of your garden, and you know what? That's fine. That's part of the course for the internet.
Absolutely, and it's also fun. Our last topic for today. On our Futurisity Podcast, we also have our special rubric named Blitz. The idea behind is very simple. I'm going to ask you questions, and you have to answer them without any kind of deep reflection and pondering. Try to follow your heart and not your brain. Try to catch the first answers that come to your mind. Okay?
Let's do it.
Main 3 reasons why men are too shy to ask the girl out.
Better at math than at interpreting social cues. Fear of rejection. What's the third one? Yeah, social cues are hard.
Okay. Tell me something you think is truly underrated in the modern world.
Underrated in the modern world. New York City. People talk a lot of shit about it. It's amazing being surrounded by a ton of people doing a ton of crazy stuff. Putting yourself surrounded by the smartest possible people that you can that are way better than you, and like seeing that accelerate your path forward.
Okay, fair enough. Does failing at something mean you are bad at it?
No, but like sometimes you should take a lesson that like maybe this is not for me and try something else, or you can try again. But I think failing quickly and repeatedly is a pretty good way to go.
Same on my side. Why do people desire love?
Neurochemistry. Move towards it. We're all microbes with 2 instructions. Move away from toxin, move towards nutrient. Love is pretty hardwired into it. Same as appreciation for so many other things. Probably prettier than that, but like neurochemistry.
All right. And the last one. What is the meaning of life? Did you figure it out?
Find the thing that gives you the greatest dopamine rush, and then do more of that. Spread out over a long time horizon. Have a positive influence on people. Hedonism gets boring really quickly, and finding things that like give you joy continuously and repeatedly over time, and then just do more of that. Find what you like, do more of that.
Cool. Thank you very much for joining. It was a pleasure to host you on the Futurisity Podcast, and I hope to see you in the next episodes. Probably we have to schedule one in a year and make a live update on AI and AI systems, and can we distinguish text from AI, like the human written text?
Appreciate it, Vlad. Appreciate the invite. Appreciate the great conversation. All the thoughtful topics.